This question comes from a curious mind who wondered, what would happen if every single person on Earth jumped at the same time? At first, it sounds like a silly idea, something a kid might ask during a car ride. But the more you think about it, the more interesting it becomes. Could billions of people actually shake the planet? Could we send Earth off its orbit, or at least make it wobble? Or would the effect be so small that we'd barely notice anything at all? Let's take a closer look. Imagine, for a moment, that all 8 billion people lined up on one side of the planet. A huge crowd stretching across continents, covering every inch of land. Then, on the count of 3, everyone bends their knees, jumps into the air, and lands back down at the exact same moment. What happens then? If you were expecting Earth to rocket through space like a trampoline being launched into orbit, you might be disappointed. Earth is unimaginably massive. The entire human population, combined, weighs roughly 500 million tons. That sounds like a lot, until you compare it to Earth's mass, which is 6 septillion tons. That's a 6 followed by 24 zeros. If all humans jumped together, the push against Earth would be like throwing a grain of sand at a freight train. The planet wouldn't even flinch. But that doesn't mean nothing would happen. On a human scale, the results could be, well, loud, chaotic, and maybe a little terrifying. When billions of people land at the same time, the ground would shake, not because Earth is moving, but because billions of feet are slamming into it at once. Entire cities would hear the greatest synchronized thud in history. It would be like one giant bass drum hit, echoing across the continents. Glass windows might rattle, birds would explode into the air in confusion, and seismographs all over the world would go crazy. In fact, scientists might think there was an earthquake, until they realized it was just humanity having the world's largest group jump. Now imagine if everyone didn't stay spread out, but instead gathered into one giant spot. Let's say we somehow transported every human onto a single enormous platform the size of New York City. 8 billion people packed shoulder to shoulder like sardines, barely able to breathe. And then, once again, on the count of 3, everyone jumps. When they come back down, the platform collapses instantly. The sheer weight of humanity hitting one place at the same time would create a massive crater, crushing the ground beneath. If it happened on land, we'd make a hole so big it might form a new lake. If it happened near the ocean, the splash would send waves across entire coastlines, flooding towns and carrying away unlucky spectators. Humanity wouldn't move Earth, but we definitely make life very uncomfortable for anyone standing too close to the water. What if instead everyone jumped on trampolines? In that case, the synchronized bounce could fling some people dangerously high. Most would just fall awkwardly and twist an ankle, but a few might actually launch far enough to regret their life choices. And if one particularly ambitious trampoline were built just right, maybe someone could reach orbit. Though, more likely, they'd just break the trampoline springs and fall face first into the ground. There's also the problem of timing. Getting 8 billion people to jump at the exact same instant is practically impossible. Even at a rock concert, where a few thousand fans are trying to clap together, someone always messes it up. Now scale that up to the entire world. By the time someone in New York jumps, someone in Tokyo is already landing, and someone in Brazil hasn't even started yet. The result is less of a synchronized jump and more of a messy, chaotic series of hops scattered around the globe. Earth would experience a constant thudding noise for a few minutes before everyone gave up and went back to scrolling on their phones. But let's pretend we somehow solved the coordination problem. Let's say everyone really did jump in perfect unison. What then? Surprisingly, something interesting happens, not to Earth, but to us. When we're in the air, Earth is actually moving underneath our feet. Our planet is spinning at over 1,600 kilometers per hour at the equator. Normally, we don't notice because we're moving with it. But if everyone jumped at once for the tiniest fraction of a second, we'd all be flying through space just a little differently than the ground beneath us. We wouldn't drift away into the sky, of course, but the mismatch could cause small differences in where we land. Some people might find themselves an inch off from where they started, which doesn't sound like much until you realize that 8 billion people all shifting around at once would create the biggest game of musical chairs in history. And then there are the social consequences. The moment after everyone lands, the world would descend into chaos.